This video is going to work on helping you with your homework transformations of rational functions. So let's go through the directions. For all problems on this worksheet, let f of x represent the parent function y equals 1 over x, and let g of x represent the parent function y equals 1 over x squared. Give the requested information for each represented. So number 1, we have this picture right here. This picture reminds me of 1 over x, but it looks like it's been shifted. Normally on 1 over x I have an asymptote at 0. Now it looks like I have one over here. So I'm going to go draw that in. And it doesn't look like I went up or down at all. So that one stays right here at y equals 0. And this one up here is at x equals negative 2. So with this information I can tell that it's the 1 over x function. And then it went left 2, but it didn't go up or down at all. So they want me to write the equation in terms of x. That means we're going to do y equals 1 over, because I went to the left, I know it's going to go in the parentheses, and we do the opposite, so I put plus 2. No squared is going to go out here because it's not the reciprocal squared. It's just my reciprocal, 1 over x. I didn't move up or down at all, so I don't need a plus 0. Then they want the horizontal asymptote and the vertical asymptote. When I do these, I remember hey and vax, and then I just go look over here at my picture where I labeled everything. Y equals 0, and my vertical asymptote is x equals negative 2. When I do the domain, I'm thinking left and right, and I'm trying to remember the vax. They kind of go together because it's my x, domain, x. So my x's is every x I can think of until I get to negative 2, and there's an asymptote there, so I don't want it, and then everything to the right of negative 2. So we're going to write negative infinity to negative 2, and then negative 2 to positive infinity. For my range, I want everything that goes up and down. So I want everything above y equals 0, and I want everything below y equals 0. So when I do the range, I always go back and look at my horizontal, my hey, because it's the y, and range means y. So I'm going to go from negative infinity to 0, then I'm going to go from 0 to positive infinity. On number 2, we can see that this is the one that Miss always called the volcano, but it looks like my volcano went upside down. So that means it's an x squared function. So I know it's upside down, so I know it reflected. It doesn't look like it went left and right at all. It looks like I'm still in the same spot, but it does look like I went up. And it looks like I went up 2. So I've got y equals 2, and this right here stated x equals 0. And I just like to label those before I get going. So the first thing they asked me to do is write the equation in terms of g of x. Now usually when they ask me to do this, I write it in terms of x first, and then I go to g of x. So I would come up here and I'd write y equals, because it's a volcano, I'm thinking it's the x squared. It didn't go left or right at all, so I don't need any parentheses. It did flip, so I need a negative out here. And it did shift up from being at 0 to up to being at 2, so I put a plus 2. Alright, so now it's a lot easier to go write the terms in g of x. So whatever is outside of the parentheses will stay outside. If there was anything in the parentheses, it'd go in here. So there's a negative outside, so I write negative, and then I write down my g. There are no parentheses, so I just write g of x. This whole piece represents the x squared, so I'm good. This means 1 over x squared, so negative 1 over x squared, and then I put plus 2. They want me to describe the transformation. So we know that it reflected over the x-axis, and it went up 2. Then they want the horizontal and the vertical asymptotes. Again, I remember vax and hey, and I already wrote them in my picture. Y equals 2, x equals 0. Okay, so 3 and 4 are going to be very similar to what we just did above. But you could try those on your own and then come back and check it. So pause the video. Alright, so you've paused the video. Hopefully you've already tried these, so you're just checking your work. On number 3, it says f of x minus 3 plus 1. So we remember at the very beginning of the video, they told me every time you see the f, it's the 1 over x. So before I start trying to graph it or answer any questions, I'm going to go write this equation in y equals. So I'm going to have y equals It's in parentheses x minus 3, so I'm going to put x minus 3 in parentheses here. Because it's the f function, I don't need a square, and there's a plus 1 out here, so I put plus 1. So now that I have my equation, the description and the graph and the x and y intercepts shouldn't be that big a deal. So for the graph, I'm going to go right 3, so 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go up 1. Okay, and my rule when I'm graphing the reciprocal function is I go to my middle point and I go right 1, up 1, and I draw my curve approaching both asymptotes. I go back to my middle and I go left 1, down 1, and I draw my curves approaching my asymptotes. Okay, so the verbal description here, we went right 3, up 1, no transformations. For the x-intercept, I can tell by looking at my picture. I don't even have to go solve it. I can tell right here that x-intercept is 2, 0. My y-intercept, I know I'm touching right here, and I know that I'm right below the 1, but I don't know the exact answer. So when you don't know the exact answer, we have to go back to our algebra skills. And in Algebra 1, we learned to find the y-intercept, we let x equal 0 and solve for y. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to let x equal 0, so y equals 1 over 0 minus 3 plus 1. And I'm going to solve. Okay, well, 1 over 0 minus 3 would be y equals negative 1/3 plus 1. Negative 1/3 plus 1 is equal to 2/3, which I knew it had to be below 1, so that makes sense. So my y-intercept is 0, 2/3. Okay, go try number 4. So pause the video and go try number 4. And then when you're ready to check your answer, turn the video back on. So on number 4, it says g of x is reflected about x-axis and shifted up 2. So the g of x function, I remember, is my x squared. They just said that we're going to reflect about the x, so I know it's going to be a negative. And it says I'm going to go up 2. So I'm not going to go left and right at all, so I don't need it in parentheses, but I am going to go up 2. So I'm going to go up 2 and draw my new asymptote. I didn't go left or right at all, so I'm still at 0, 0. Normally when I do an x squared, I go to my middle and I go right 1, up 1, but because it's a reflection, I'm going to go right 1, down 1. And this is the one that looks like the volcano. Normally when I do the x squared, I go to my middle and I go left 1, up 1. Because it's negative, I'm going to go left 1, down 1, and again, I'm going to approach both sides. Now that I have my picture, this should be a little easier. Even or odd, this would be an even function because I can reflect it about the y. They want the x-intercepts and they want the y-intercepts. Okay, so by looking at my picture, I can tell that I'm never, ever, ever going to touch the y. So I can go right, does not exist. But I do touch the x's, but I really can't tell what those are. So this time we're going to practice solving the x-intercepts using our algebra. So our equation is right here. Y equals negative 1 over x squared plus 2. I guess I could go ahead and write that right here since they asked for it. And when you're looking for an x-intercept, I'm going to do my work down here at the bottom, you let y equal 0 and solve for x. Okay, so over here we practice solving for the y, now we're going to practice solving for the x. So I go to my equation right here and I'm going to let y equal 0. So we're going to write 0 equals negative 1 over x squared plus 2. And I'm going to go solve for x. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to minus 2. So negative 2 equals negative 1 over x squared. Because the x squared is in the bottom, I have to go multiply both sides by x squared. When I multiply the left, I get negative 2x squared equals, when I multiply the right, I have a negative 1. I'm now going to divide by negative 2. So x squared equals negative 1 divided by negative 2, which is positive 1/2. Then I have to take the square root. And when we take the square root, we always write plus or minus 1/2. So let's go look at our graph and see if that makes sense. So it's going to be touch the x at a positive square root of 1/2 and a negative square root of 1/2. Well, I do see that it's going to touch somewhere on the positive and the negative, and it is going to be smaller than 1 and smaller than negative 1. So that does make sense. So my x-intercept is plus or minus the square root of 1/2. Okay, so let's go look at the back of the worksheet now. On the back, number 6, it's a lot like number 1. So again, pause the video and go try it. Number 6 is very similar to number 4. So again, pause the video and go try it. So on number 5, hopefully you've tried it now. I can tell that I went to the right 2, x equals 2. And I can tell that I went down 1, y equals -1. Okay, I also can tell by looking at this that this is the 1 over x function. And now that I have that label, everything should pretty much come together. So horizontal asymptote is your hey, it's your y equals, and it's y equals -1. Your vertical asymptote is your x equals, and we have x equals +2. Your domain always goes with your vertical asymptote, so we're going from -infinity to 2, and we're going from 2 to +infinity. Your range always goes with your hey, your horizontal asymptote, so we're going from -infinity to -1, and from -1 to +infinity. They want me to write my equations in terms of f of x and x. I always do the x one first, it's a little easier. So y equals, because I went to the right 2, 1 over x, I do the opposite, -2. Because I went down 1, I write a -1. When you do the f of x, remember if it's in parentheses, you put it in this parentheses. If it's out of the parentheses, you put it out of the parentheses. Okay, so there's no negative outside, so I don't have to worry about that. I do have an x -2 in here, so I'm going to write x -2. I have a -1 on the outside, and we're done. That's it. Okay, hopefully you've already done number 6 also. On number 6, it tells me that I have a horizontal asymptote at 2. I'm going to go take care of that. All right, y equals 2. I have vertical asymptote at -1, so x equals -1. And then they kind of sneak this in here. They tell you that you are g of x. So if it's g of x, you need to be thinking of 1 over x squared. I can tell that I went left 1 and I went up 2. They also tell me that I have no x-intercepts. Because I have no x-intercepts, this is going to go up, so there's not going to be a reflection. And they tell me that I touch the y at +3, so 1, 2, 3. I know I'm going to go through the y right there. All right, so I just said that we went, I already forgot what I said. We went left 1 and up 2. So y equals, remember I like to do the one in terms of x first, 1 over x plus 1 squared, do the opposite, and then up 2. And again, I know there's not a reflection because they said there was no x-intercepts. If it reflected, it would have touched the x. So since there's no reflection, I know from my center I go out 1, up 1, which makes sense because I touched at 3. And then I go left 1, up 1 because it's the x squared. It's the one that looks like the volcano. So now I'm going to go do my, in terms of g of x. If it's in the parentheses, put it in the parentheses. If it's out, put it out. So there's no negative out here, so it's just g of x plus 1. We don't have to put the square. That's what the g is telling me. Then I put +2. My domain, I'm going to go back and look at my vertical asymptote. So it's going to be from -infinity to -1, and from -1 to +infinity. Your range, I'm going to go look at my horizontal asymptote, and remember that I'm above it. So it's going to go from 2 to infinity, and up and up and up. Number 7 and number 8 are just asking you to review whether or not you remember what even and odd functions are. It says 2 of the problems in 1 through 6 are even. Remember, even means that you can fold it on the y-axis. So we can look at number 5 and say no. We can look at number 6 and say no. Let's go back and look at the other ones. It looks like number 2 is an even function, and so is number 4, because you can fold both of those on the y-axis, and they're symmetric to each other. So on number 7, we said 2 and 4, because they're symmetric about the y-axis. Are any of the functions on the worksheet odd? If they're odd, it means you can fold it across the origin, which means it's a double flip. So number 5 is not odd. Number 1 had a transformation, so it's also not odd. Number 3 had a transformation, so it's also not odd. So are any of them odd? No, none are symmetric about the origin. Okay. Make sure you study your homework and you watch the video again. You will see some of these on your test. Good luck. Hope this helps.